Hi gaming guys, and welcome to episode 19 of Import Nights, the review series for the JDM performance car scene on Gran Turismo 6 and the various vehicles within that. A very strong category, it has to be said. Not surprising that a Japanese game would present their cars as being pretty good. It's similar with Forza. In fact, Forza is of course an American game, and many of the American cars are very good on there. But in both cases, in different ways, that's justified, because as with any country, there are good points and bad points to their cars. Japan in particular has a very strong value for money factor on their performance cars. You get a lot of performance for what you pay, and interestingly enough, you actually get that from American cars as well. You get a huge amount of power for the money, both in game and in real life. Now, in this particular pick, we're revisiting a vehicle which we've featured before, the Honda Integra Type R, but whereas we already featured the DC5 shape, the newer Integra, this is of course the DC2. This car is a legend, one of the most legendary cars of the entire series, possibly the most respected front-wheel drive car of all time. Maybe, maybe not. I think it's got a pretty good chance of being, and it's a brilliant performance car. I've never heard a bad word said about the Integra DC2. It's basically a perfect vehicle for what it's supposed to do. And I absolutely love the car. Now, I already mentioned that I love the DC5, but I love the DC2 even more. It's one of my favourite Japanese cars. Unfortunately for me personally, my favourite version of this car is actually not featured on Gran Turismo, and never has been as far as I'm aware, and that's the DB8 version with 4 doors, because I love the fact that it has the improved practicality. We don't have that on the game. We do, however, have more than one version. We have multiple years, 95, 99, 98, and each of them is different. They're not exactly the same. The older models are less powerful, but lighter, the newer models vice versa, and they do actually look slightly different as well, especially in terms of the rear bumper in particular. There's a pretty big difference, in fact, between the 95 shape's rear bumper and the car that you see here, which is the 99 model. Now, I chose the 99 model because it's basically the best model, but as I said, the older ones are lighter, so you have to choose for yourself. Now, as far as what you get, this car has a smaller engine than the newer Integra, a 1.8 litre. You can turbocharge the engine up to 426 horsepower in the case of this one. You're looking at roughly 417 in the older DC2. And as far as torque, it's actually not too bad. It's a small capacity VTEC, so you wouldn't really expect it to be that torquey, even necessarily with a turbo, but it actually is. 251 foot-pounds is not bad at all in its fully tuned form, and peak torque along with peak power, not surprisingly at all for a VTEC, arrives at very high RPM levels. 9,000 RPM for peak power, 8,500 for peak torque. So this is essentially the closest you can get to a race engine in a mass production road car. It loves to be worked hard, it's a screamer of an engine, and it gives you great performance, and that's why there are so many VTEC fans. Now, as far as weight, even the newer Integra is a lightweight vehicle considering its size. This car is even better. This particular model, the newest model, the DC2, weighs 903 kilos with the full weight loss package, and that's ultra light. That's only just a little bit heavier than some Le Mans prototypes. Now, as I said, the older models are lighter. The 95 shape, for instance, weighs about 886 kilos, so you drop by not quite 20 kilos, but thereabouts. So, as I said, it depends what you want. If you're willing to sacrifice a little bit of power for the older model, you can drop the weight a little bit as well. So, there are pros and cons of each version of the DC2. As far as PP, it's reasonably high, but you can understand why in the case of this car. It's such a legendary and highly capable performance car that the fact that it has a maximum tuned PP of 530 isn't really that surprising. Now, whether or not I'd actually recommend racing at that level is another thing entirely, but what I'm saying is that I can understand why it's that high. This car has a lot of respect from the GranTurismo community, the performance car community in real life, and certainly from the makers of the game, because it's a brilliant car, just as it should be. As far as horsepower per tonne, you're looking at 472, which is really good given the power that it's got to work with, and the fact that it is so good is of course mainly due to just how low the weight is. Now, as far as price, if I remember correctly, they do vary a little bit, but this particular model is just over 25 grand. So, I mean, value for money is through the roof on this car. It's superb value. No, it doesn't give you the straight line performance of a Supra or a Skyline, of course, but considering that it doesn't have anywhere near the kind of power of many of the other cars in this series, what it does for the spec that it's given is really impressive. Now, this is of course much better as a track car than a straight line machine. People do love to drag with VTEC engine cars, but generally they're racing them against other VTECs, Civics, Integras, Preludes, etc. You don't tend to see them drag racing stuff that's much beyond that. You don't see them taking on many of the other cars in this series, for instance, because the Integra of this generation and the DC5 just doesn't really have enough top speed to do that. That's fine though, because that's just not what it's designed for. It's like saying that a Formula 1 car isn't particularly good at drifting. Well, no, maybe so, but it's not supposed to be. Likewise with any Integra, it's a track car first and foremost, and for 25 grand, the amount of trackability which you get, especially around something like, say, 475 pp, which is where I often race mine, it's superb. One of the best cars you can get, hands down. So if by some chance you don't have one, I'd definitely recommend checking out the DC2. But that's it for this pick overall. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.